What did the Hillsborough inquests that happened in Warrington, what did they reveal for anyone who's new to the subject?
The inquests that were held in Warrington from 2014 to 2016, so 2 years, is the longest court case ever in British history in front of a jury. And that was held because finally, after 21 years, the original inquest from 1991 that found that the people had been killed and it was certified to be accidental death had finally been quashed after the families campaign. So that means that finally it had been overturned in court, which is what the families had been fighting for 21 years. It was overturned in 2012. And the new inquests turned into this huge battle in court between the South Yorkshire Police, people who had been officers at the time, and the case that Liverpool supporters were drunk and many of them didn't have tickets and that they weren't cooperative with the police and that they came late, and that had so disrupted things that was a big cause of why the disaster happened, was fully rejected by the jury. And the jury found that the 96, as it was then, it's now 97 because sadly in 2021, Andrew Devine died and was certified to be the 97th person unlawfully killed. And also, the jury was explicitly asked to come to a decision about whether the behaviour of Liverpool supporters contributed to, in essence, the disaster, but to the dangerous situation that developed outside the ground, outside the Leppings Lane end. And the jury came back and said, no behaviour by Liverpool supporters contributed to the disaster. Therefore, it's been found in a court of law at an inquest, which provides death certificates. So it's like there's a certificate of this, that all those years of telling these stories about Liverpool supporters were wholly rejected by the jury, and that no behaviour contributed. And I covered many days of that inquest for the Guardian, and my memory of that and feeling about it is that the jury were able to reach that decision not just because the lawyers for the families were very good, but literally they were just played the film of the crowd. This is a remarkable thing about Hillsborough in some ways, that police were able to tell these stories. But because it was a football match, a prestigious football match, it was an FA Cup semi-final. It was on television. And so outside as well, the crowd was filmed. I think the BBC had a camera outside. Sheffield Wednesday had cameras, CCTV. The police had film and photographs. And so they just played so much of the video. And you could see that people hadn't arrived, in large numbers late. There was no evidence that anyone could see of anyone being drunk, causing trouble. And so that is the verdict that the jury came to.
Something that trial didn't really cover, though, was the alleged cover-up from West Yorkshire Police and beyond. That's something you've had a big area of work in. So could you just explain to the viewers and the readers why there is still a sense of injustice over Hillsborough despite getting the
Yeah.
verdict of unlawful killing? And do you think there will ever be any prosecutions over the alleged cover-up?
As you said at the beginning, the families have come a hugely long way because they secured that inquest verdict. Um, and it came in April 2016. So 27 years it took them from the disaster. But once you get a verdict of unlawful killing, plus a whole narrative of the police has been not believed. all these stories have just not been believed by a jury. Then you would expect people to be held accountable. So there have been prosecutions. So David Conn, the match commander, who was a chief superintendent at South Yorkshire Police, who was found to have been grossly negligent by the jury at the inquest, because that's the basis of the unlawful killing verdict. He was prosecuted for gross negligence manslaughter, but in 2019 the jury acquitted him, so he was found not guilty of that on a criminal charge. 3 police officers were charged with an offence called perverting the course of public justice for a process of amending the statements of police officers after the disaster. So police officers had made statements, and then there was a process of reviewing them and suggesting that they be amended, right? And that case was basically stopped or thrown out because the judge ruled that those statements, the police statements, had been made for principally the first public inquiry that was held after the disaster, which was by Lord Justice Taylor, the famous Taylor reports. And the judge in 2021, and that's how long it all took, found that the Taylor inquiry, the format of the Taylor inquiry, wasn't a course of public justice. It didn't, in effect, qualify as a court case. It was more like what I think he called an administrative inquiry. So therefore, even if the statements had been amended, in a way that was very serious, and he didn't say whether it was or not, but even if they had been, they wouldn't have committed that criminal offence of perverting the course of public justice. And that was the basis on which they were acquitted. They were formally found not guilty. So the only person to be convicted of any criminal offence as a result of what happened at Hillsborough is the person who was Secretary of Sheffield Wednesday at the time, called Graham McCrell. And he was prosecuted for the way that for the arrangements for how people would enter the Leppings Lane end and enter the turnstiles in basically what numbers they had to go through which turnstiles. But that was a health and safety offence that he was charged with, not with a negligence type offence that caused the disaster, just a health and safety offence about those arrangements. And he was fined £6,500. And that is the only criminal conviction of anybody in relation to a disaster in which 97 people were unlawfully killed due to the gross negligence of the match commander, and a huge number of other failings were identified, and a whole police narrative was mounted to blame the victims, to blame the people who'd suffered in the crush, and make allegations of misbehaviour against them, which have been completely disbelieved. There have been no convictions of anyone for that, or any disciplinary proceedings, I don't think. And to answer your final question, Sam, no, I don't think there will be any further prosecutions. I think that's accepted, even by the family. I don't mean accepted like they've come to terms with it. I just mean I think everybody knows that that's the end of the process.